Chapter 9.1 Classification of Joints. By the end of this section, you will be able to distinguish between the functional and structural classification for joints, describe the three functional types of joints and give an example of each, list the three types of diarthroidal joints. Joints are where two bones come together and move in relation to each other. They are also referred to as articulations. Joints provide strength, support, and protection for the soft tissues of the body that are deeper. Basic terminology associated with joints include arthrology, which is the study of joints in the body, kinesiology, which would be the study of movement, and arthritis, which is when there is inflammation in a joint. Classification of joints can occur through a structural classification, which is according to their anatomical characteristics, or a functional classification, which is according to their physiological characteristics or their range of motion. Let's look at the structural classification of joints first. Structurally, joints are classified as fibrous, cartilaginous, or synovial. Fibrous joints are held together by a thin layer of fibrous, dense, regular connective tissue. Additionally, fibrous joints have no joint cavity. Examples of fibrous joints would include sutures, syndesmoses, which occur at bones such as the tibia and the fibula, gymphoses, and a gymphosis is the joint that occurs between a tooth and the alveolar socket, or alveolar process that it rests within. Cartilaginous joints are held together by cartilage, and they also lack a joint cavity. Examples of cartilaginous joints include symphyses, such as the intervertebral disc or the pubic symphysis, and synchondroses, such as the costochondral joint, where the cartilage and the rib meet. Synovial joints are the most complex structural type of joint, having a joint cavity. In addition, they have an articular capsule and synovial fluid that are part of those joints, and we'll look at their structure more later. Most joints in the body are synovial joints, and another key thing about synovial joints is that when it comes to functional classification, synovial joints are classified as freely movable joints, or diarthroses. Examples of synovial joints include hinge joints, pivot joints, ball and socket joints, saddle joints, condyloid joints, and planar joints. Functionally, joints are classified according to the degree of movement or motion they allow. Joints can be classified functionally as a synarthrosis, an amphiarthrosis, or a diarthrosis. A synarthrosis, syn a prefix meaning joined together, and osis, a suffix meaning condition of, is an immobile or immovable joint. Synarthroses can be fibrous or cartilaginous joints, depending on the type of connection that forms between the two bones in the joint. Examples of synarthroses include sutures, gymphoses, and synchondroses. An amphiarthrosis is a slightly movable or slightly mobile joint. Amphiarthroses can be either fibrous or cartilaginous depending on the type of connection between the two joining bones. Examples of amphiarthroses include symphyses and syndesmoses. The final functional classification of joints is a diarthrosis. Diarthroses are freely movable joints. Synovial joints are diarthroses, and diarthroses are going to be further divided according to their planes of movement. So examples of diarthroses would include any type of synovial joint. That could be hinge joints such as the knee, ball and socket joints such as the shoulder, and so on, as we will look at further later in the lecture. At a joint, stability and mobility are inversely related. And what this really just means is that the more stable a joint is, the less mobile a joint is. So our most stable joint in the body are the sutures that attach the cranial bones together and hold them together. They're immobile, they allow for no movement, and so it creates a very stable joint. And as you move down to the bottom of the arrow, that stability is decreasing and the mobility or the movement that's allowed at the joint is increasing until we get to our most mobile joint, which is the glenohumeral joint or the shoulder joint. And this joint is the most mobile, which means that it's the least stable. And so our shoulder joint, although it gives us a great range of motion, is prone to being moved out of its proper position, in other words, dislocated, because it's not very stable. A synarthrosis is where the bony edges of two bones are quite close together. These are extremely strong and stable joints that are located in places where bone movement at the joint must be prevented. And that's what classifies a synarthrosis as immobile or a non-movable joint. Synarthroses can be found at locations that provide protection for internal organs, and examples of synarthroses include the sutures that join the cranial bones in order to protect the brain. An amphiarthrosis provides little movement. An amphiarthrosis will permit more movement than a synarthrosis, which provides no movement, but not quite as much as a diarthrosis. The articulating bones are connected by cartilaginous fibers. Amphiarthroses are going to be found in places where having a strong bony connection or joint is necessary, so that there is some mobility that's allowed, but it can still be weight-bearing to provide for stability. So amphiarthroses can be found at the intervertebral disc and the pubic symphysis. Diarthroses are freely movable joints. They allow for quite a bit of motion or free movement at the joints. All synovial joints are diarthroses, and they can allow for a wide range of motion along the transverse, the frontal, and sagittal planes. So the planar movements, or the planes of movements, include a uniaxial joint or a monaxial joint. This means that there's movement in one plane. This can be seen with joints such as the elbow joint and the knee joint. In other words, our hinge joints are uniaxial or monaxial joints. They only allow that movement in that single plane. We have biaxial joints, which allow movement in two planes. Biaxial joints would include things like the knuckles, the carpal region, the ribs. And then we have multiaxial joints, which allow movement or motion in all three planes. And so our ball and socket joints, the shoulder or glenohumeral joint, and our hip or coxal joints are examples of multiaxial joints, where movement is allowed in all three of those planes. Now it's time for the 9.1 concept check. Let's check to see if you've got it. You can take this quick concept check and click the hyperlink to see if you understand the concepts of 9.1, or if you need to review them one more time.